Awesome. So today we are with Jim, the kids pastor at C3 Church, and really excited to chat today, Jim. Could you, for starters, give us a bit about your background, your story? Like, what called you into ministry, and how did you wind up in your current role at C3?
Sure. I mean, I've grown up in the church my entire life, and I think growing up in the church, I just really enjoyed it. I enjoyed being at church. I grew up in an era which doesn't seem so long ago, but it feels kind of like a long time ago, where there was church services like almost every single night, right? There was the Sunday
Mm-hmm.
mornings, the Sunday nights, the Wednesday nights, the Tuesday nights,
Mm-hmm.
and I grew up in a family where we went to church all the time. And so I was just completely surrounded by everything church. And so I truly did enjoy it as a young kid. And so I think as I got older, as most teenagers and young adults do, try to figure out what they want to do with their lives. And I tried all sorts of things. I went to, I took some classes in accounting and business and sports management, and even, dabbled in the medical field for a little bit. And just
Mm-hmm.
really couldn't ever find my purpose, couldn't find my place. And so everything I tried didn't seem to work out. And I would try something, and it just, I was like, man, I don't feel passionate about that. And so even as a young kid, I had this kind of burning thought in the back of my mind that, I would be, a pastor someday. But I never ever, even though I thought about it, I never really imagined it would come true. And it
Mm-hmm.
was back in 2011. I was working in the restaurant industry, and I had been in the restaurant industry for quite a long time. And again, I was just wrestling with what do I want to do with my life and that type of thing. And I got to a place where I had been praying pretty much the entire year of 2011, and didn't really feel like I had an answer. But I did have this thought, like, what if it's ministry? I've had this thought in the back of my mind for such a long time. Maybe that's something. And so I began praying about it. And it was in November of 2011. I remember that specifically because I had reached out to one of my best friends at the time, and he was actually a youth pastor in ministry. And I said, hey, John, like, I've been wrestling with this thought. What do you think? Because I took ministry very seriously, right? That isn't something that you just do, right?
Mm-hmm.
I truly believe it is a calling that God gives certain people. And so I was wrestling with it, and he said something so profound, and I thought it was absolutely amazing. He said, Jim, you can look at the door, you can study the door, but until you actually turn the handle and walk through the door, you're never going to know if this is what God has for you. And he began to encourage me. He did, he felt like, he's like, I think I could see you in ministry, and I think you're going to do an awesome job if that's what you decide, but you have to make the decision. And so I took a huge step of faith and was like, okay, I'm going to take this step of faith. I'm going to see if ministry is, for me. And it was in January 2012. So a couple months later,
Mm-hmm.
I started taking some Bible courses, Bible classes, and I did that for the entire year of 2012. And every step of the way, God was confirming that this is what I was supposed to be doing.
Mm-hmm.
And so I ended up getting my credentials in ministry, and I had been, we had just started attending a new church at the time. And so that's how I started in ministry. I didn't start with a job. I started serving. And so I started as a volunteer, and it just kind of grew. I was serving once a month, and then it was twice a month. And then, somebody ended up moving to another state, and they're like, hey, can you do it, a couple more times a month? So I was serving every
Mm-hmm.
week. And all the while, God was, preparing me, to step into ministry. And so serving turned into an internship, which turned into a stipend role. And then it was a part-time role. And then, finally landed a role in 2016 as a full-time, kids pastor. And
Awesome.
it was great. And so that was at a church in, Cleveland, Ohio, which I'm originally from. And,
Cool.
a couple years later, we decided to make a jump, make a moved, left everything we knew in Cleveland, Ohio, to Columbus, Ohio, and took the kids pastor position at C3 Church. And
There you
we've
go.
been here ever since. So it's been great.
Awesome. Well, that is very exciting. So thank you for sharing your story there, Jim. And yeah, that is, kind of scary because a lot of young people, especially, it's like, hey, what do I want to do with my life? So many options, which does not make the choice easier, makes
Right.
it harder, analysis
Yeah.
paralysis. Um, so what particular advice, pulling on that thread, would you offer to someone thinking, should I serve in ministry? Because it can be, there's a lot to be on the fence about. Like,
Right.
is it really my calling? Is this really for me? What advice would you offer someone vaguely either considering or on the fence about serving or pursuing a career in ministry?
Yeah, I would say exactly what exactly what my friend said to me is just take a step of faith. It doesn't have to be a giant step. Like mine was kind of a giant step. It was, hey, I'm going to take some Bible classes and see if this is really for me. It might be just starting to serve, right? Hey, if there's something that you're thinking about doing, whether it's the worship team or the production team or kids ministry, just taking a step. Hey, maybe connecting with that pastor or that leader of that department and finding out, is this something that I can bring value to, right? Is this
Mhm.
something that's going to fulfill me? And if those are both yeses, then that's always a great start. And so I would say to someone that's wants to start serving or even thinking about ministry, start there. And then
Good guy.
you never know what God's going to do, the doors that he'll open and the opportunities that he'll give you. um, I was extremely blessed and grateful to have the opportunities and to really just to have the wisdom to say yes to them, because that can be
Mhm.
scary too, right? If an opportunity comes, you can wrestle with that opportunity, like, oh, should I do it? But I fully trusted God to that He was going to provide in some way. And it was, again, it felt like stepping stones, like one step led to the other, and got me to where I'm at. So
Absolutely. Yeah, that is good advice. You don't have to jump in the deep end to test something out. So, yeah,
right.
and as everyone is always down to, recruit more volunteers. So, yeah, if you're on the
Right.
fence, it's like, hey, there's probably someone happy, more than overjoyed to have you as a volunteer
Exactly.
this weekend.
Exactly.
So, awesome, awesome, awesome. And with that, uh, you've seen, been working in ministry full time since 2016, but it sounds like around 2012 really got involved. So you've
Yeah.
almost like a decade of experience, in kids ministry and stuff. So, what are some of your like go-to things for maintaining and engaging ministry where kids are, wanting to come back, where they're learning and growing spiritually? Like, what tips do you have for building a ministry like that?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, when I first started in ministry, I think one of my focuses right when I first started out is I wanted to make it fun. I wanted to make, I wanted to make kids ministry so much fun that they could not wait to come back, the
Mhm.
following Sunday. And so I think a lot of times, especially as ministry leaders, we can get hung up on the details of, kids ministry, where it's like, oh, we have to do the curriculum and, all the things that you have to do to make the service work. And there's a place for that. But I think sometimes we forget to have fun. And so I think that's just part of the way God has wired me, is like, I want to make sure it's fun, right? We're going to have a good time while we're doing those things, while we're learning about the Bible, while we're, discovering, what God has for us that day, but making it fun. And so that's different for everybody,
Mhm.
creating an environment where it could be fun. So, um, I mean, there's so many things that you could do to make it fun, but I think being uh, I guess a tip for people that are maybe struggling with, hey, my environment's just kind of maybe flat, or maybe it's not as fun as it used to be, is getting in tune with your kids, right? So doesn't matter what age group that you oversee. You could be a volunteer or you could be the kids pastor, but getting in tune to what's going on in their world right now. What's fun to them, right? Is it Fortnite? Is it, you know um,
Mhm.
puppets and the different sensory things, the fidget toys that the kids are in now? So getting in tune with what's fun to them, and then how can you incorporate that without overtaking the services, but how can you incorporate some fun elements that, from those things that would help make your services, a little bit more engaging. Now, I will say it can't all be fun, right? It can't be a wild party every single Sunday, but,
Mhm.
tapping into some of those things will help the kids stay engaged. You know what I mean? Um, so yeah, hopefully that answers your question on that. So
Yeah, more than answers it. Yeah, it is important to speak their language and be really relatable because yeah, you can't have like party every Sunday, but it also can't seem irrelevant. Like if you just put a real book Bible in front of them, or like, okay,
yeah,
read this,
yeah,
that's not gonna be fun.
right,
So
right,
like
yeah,
I mean, just speaking frankly there because understanding and really kind of like you said in tune with the kids in your
yeah,
ministry is key. So yeah, thank you for those suggestions as well, Jim. And
sure.
it can be depending on your church a little risky per se sometimes to try more engaging things. So what are some like values you and your church operate by to ensure that you are trying new things and testing out ways to be engaged?
Yeah. So one of our values as a church, and we have several of them, but one of them that is really kind of the heartbeat of who I am is constant improvement. And so
Mm,
I'm constantly finding ways to improve our kids ministry, to innovate. So I wouldn't consider myself a creative person. I'm not great at abstracting ideas just out of thin air, but I am great at researching, other churches and what they're doing, but also kind of making it our own, like helping it fit our
mm,
environment. So that helps me think outside the box. So similar
mm,
to what fun can do in a kid's environment, I think sometimes giving ourselves permission to think outside the box. Let's just throw it out there and see, if this idea would work for us. And maybe if it
mhm,
doesn't, that's okay. But what part of that idea will help, like will work for us? So I would say one of our values as a church, but also as a value of myself and even our kids ministry is innovation, constant improvement. How can we make it better? How can we make it more
mhm.
engaging? We're always asking ourselves those things. And I think it makes it, to answer the previous question again, it makes it more fun, right? So if,
Absolutely.
for example, if we want to teach our kids how to read the Bible, well, like you said, putting the Bible in front of them and saying, hey, read this, or we're going to read this together. What's another way that we can make it more engaging? Do we want to do prizes if you can be the first one to look up the Bible verse, or, things like that
Mhm.
to kind of, again, make it a little bit more engaging, make it a little bit more fun. But you're kind of, again, you're tapping into that creativity, that innovation. So that's one of our values is constant improvement. So we're
Absolutely.
always looking in every area, not just service order, but things like technology and media and resources and that we can give parents and things like that.
Absolutely. Yeah, constant improvement is key. And like you said, it doesn't matter if you're not a creative person per se, as long as you're constantly trying new things, creativity is going to happen.
Right.
A
Right.
thousand tries to make the light bulb.
Yeah.
So yeah,
It's
that
good.
is brilliant and something I think as church leaders we need to think about it more. It's like, hey, what are we gonna do to make this week better than last week?
Right.
Or like what are a few ideas? So
Yeah.
always something to keep in the forefront. And on that, what are some of your top like short term and then long term goals in ministry, at least for
So
like this year?
yeah, so I would say a short-term goal, something that we're right in the middle of, is recruiting volunteers, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I know every church and every kids ministry, every ministry is always looking for more team members. So especially with the pandemic and the rise of COVID cases and people being online more and all that stuff, and we see it now, in different parts of the United States where there's different lockdown procedures and some churches aren't even fully open yet. So it has really kind of thrown our teams all over the place, right? So we're not seeing as many people come to church as pre-pandemic, and so our teams are kind of like all scattered, and everybody has a different view on things. So that's been the biggest challenge and for most churches is just how do we regroup? How do we recruit more team members? And so that's kind of what we're doing right now. So that's a short-term goal of ours, is just get more team members. We don't have a number because I don't care about the number right now. If we get 5 more volunteers, great, right? If we get 10 more team members, awesome. So there really isn't, we haven't put a number on the goal. It's just get more, right? And so, so that's a short-term goal. A long-term goal for this year, my focus is partnering with parents. So one thing that we've seen in the last couple of years is that parents are exhausted, right? And so how do we come alongside them and not just do something for them, but help them raise their child in a godly way, right? And so that's kind of our focus, is what are some resources, what are some tools that we can give parents? Because the reality is, if a child comes to church every single Sunday, that's roughly what, 50 Sundays, maybe, give or take. We have Christmas off, that type of thing. That's if they come every single Sunday. But the trend right now is we get about 40 hours with a child for the entire year. That's 1 week. That's 1 week's worth of time. So we are not their greatest influence. Their parents are their greatest influence, or their guardians. And so how do we partner with them to help raise their child in a godly way? Because it can't be us anymore, right? We can help supplement, we can give them a great experience on Sunday morning, but what about Monday through Saturday? So that's what we're kind of chewing through right now, is how do we partner with parents? And I've kind of given our team some freedom and given them permission to think big and small, right? It doesn't have to be this grand campaign or project. Like, what are the small things that we can do on a weekly and daily basis they're going to help support families? So that's our short-term goal. That's our long-term goal. So it's pretty exciting.
Oh yeah, I mean, very, very exciting, and partnering with parents is paramount to ministry success. So, yeah, that is. Thank you so much for sharing those, and the advice as well. Since a lot of other folks are, those are their top goals as well: recruiting volunteers, partnering with parents. We can do a lot to support parents, and so it's great to see that as one of your top priorities, Jim. So I've really enjoyed you sharing so much this afternoon. What other advice would you want to offer for ministry leaders?
I would say anybody that's in ministry, especially like next gen ministry, kids ministry, youth ministry, I would say care for your team. If there's anything that we can do differently this year and next year and the following years to come, is to care and appreciate your team. Because without them, we can't do the ministry that we need to do, right? And so I'm only one person, right? They're only one person. There's only so much that we can do. So the ministry, right? The Bible tells us to equip the saints to do the work of the ministry. So the ministry falls on their shoulders, right? Yes, it falls on us, but it also falls on them. And so building a strong team, building a team that will last, in my personal opinion, it comes down to care and appreciation, right? How are we caring for them? Not just caring for them, in their times of need, but how are we appreciating them? How are we supporting them? How are we helping them grow? How are we, helping them be discipled in their own personal spiritual walk? So all those things comes under care. And then also just valuing them, right? How are you showing that you appreciate your team? Is it the once a year event, or is it on a regular basis? Is it through thank you cards? Is it through a text message? Is it through a phone call? Is it periodically through, quarterly, gifts or something like that? Because I think, because they're doing ministry, they're doing things outside of their normal jobs and their normal everyday responsibilities of being parents, right? We want to show them that they're valued, and they are valued. So I would say that's kind of my advice for anybody that's looking for a focus, for 2022, is care and appreciate your team members.
Absolutely, cannot agree more. And yeah, with all your team members, it's important to remind them, hey, you are valued. We care about you. There's a statistic for like team members in a company. You need to give them 3 pieces of encouragement for every 1 piece of criticism. A good ratio for marriage, it's actually a 5-to-1 ratio. So that was something to keep in mind. But yeah, so you gotta, be sure you are showing people you care. And it can be little things, you don't have to throw a party for volunteers every week or something. But just, hey, a nice comment, or let them know you're there if they need something. So awesome. Well, Jim, thank you so much for sharing today. It was great to talk. Appreciate the candid advice for other ministry leaders.
Absolutely.
Excited what's ahead.
Yeah, I was saying absolutely. I appreciate the call. I appreciate you bringing me on. It's an honor.
Awesome.